Welcome to the Business Growth Spotlight, where we shine the light and talk with business leaders from all over the world who are here to share their expertise and wisdom so we can all grow together. I'm your host, Heidi Schalk, co-founder of HLH Growth Solutions. And if you're new to the podcast, welcome. We're really excited to have you here with us. But without further ado, I want to introduce my special guest today. We've been chatting a lot behind the scenes, and I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of gold drops. So you don't want to miss one piece of this conversation. So welcome. I want to welcome Dr. Carlos Elizondo to the podcast with Elizondo Medical Group. So welcome, Dr. Carlos. Glad to have you here.
Hello, Heidi. Welcome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Like I said, we've been chatting a lot behind the scenes, and I wish I had all of that recorded because it was so much goodness, but we're going to just dive in. So Dr. Carlos, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your medical practice, business, and what got you started?
Yes, absolutely. So, I'm a family doctor. I've been practicing, solo practice for about 9 years. And I guess you can say it runs in the family because my father was an internist in a little town called Alice, Texas, and he started back in 1982. And so we just kind of kept that going. And my brother's also a family doctor. His name's Dr. Miguel Elizondo. So we're on the same team right now. My father, unfortunately, no longer with us, but he really instilled in us how to be great doctors. And, so I really feel it runs in the family. And so we've been on this journey. We've taken, my father's practice from one location into 3 locations. My wife is a big part of this. I always say she's the boss. And so because she's really that glue that holds everything together. So that way I can really focus on, what I'm good at, which is taking care of patients. And so, I went to medical school in Mexico, in Guadalajara, Mexico. Best thing I ever did because, it made me bilingual. It just really shaped the kind of person and doctor that I am. I went to residency here in Corpus where we have a couple of locations. So Corpus Christi at the Christus Spawn Memorial Residency Program, just a great program. We practice at Memorial Hospital, which is no longer with us anymore. They tore it down, but it was one of those hospitals where the residents really, it was an underserved location, and we really ran the hospital. And whenever you run the hospital as a resident, you just learn so much. When you take care of the ICU on your own on certain rotations, we had some backup, we had our attendings there, but for the most part, we really had to do a lot of it. And, I always tell people the more patients you see, the more complexity you see, the better you become. And so I'm just super grateful for that training. And here we are, this is going to be our 10th year.
Wow.
10 years in July. I'm just super excited because there's just been so many different transformations from, going from Alice, then coming into Corpus. There was an unfortunate situation where one of the doctors passed away in a surfing accident, and we were able to take over his clinic. It was an emotional situation and one of the most difficult things we've ever done, but we were able to step in. And this doctor was just an amazing doctor. His name was Dr. McCreese, just such an amazing person and really big shoes to fill. And we feel like we've done a great job. And it's challenging. It's challenging to have multiple locations. We partnered up with another nurse practitioner who lost her, supervising doctor. And so that made us, with 3 locations on different sides of town, different demographics. So my passion has always been the underserved, rural medicine. I really feel that everybody deserves that high quality care, whether you live in a ranch, whether you're a cowboy, a farmer, you live in a ranch, or whether you're in the city, we really feel that everybody deserves that high quality care. And so this will be the 10th year. So we're just super excited.
Well, I want to say congratulations to you on almost 10 years. That is a great accomplishment. And I'm sure you've had some ups and downs along the way, which we will get to. But Dr. Carlos, can you share with us, what did those early days look like operating your own practice in Alice and Corpus Christi? And were there any big surprises and tough challenges of going out on your own that you faced?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a dichotomy with, being the physician when we're really focused on patient care, and then also having that business because you have to pay the bills. Unfortunately, that's kind of how it goes. And so it's very difficult to, I would see patients for free if I could. And so that battle between being a doctor and being a business owner is something different, I feel, in the medical field as far as business goes. I always thought that it was different. And one day I finally realized and came to, just admitted to myself that I truly wasn't just a doctor, that I was an entrepreneur. And to me, that was something I never even thought that I would admit or say, because you just always kind of revert back to being a doctor. Doctors are usually paid what we call fee for service. Patient comes in to see us, we get paid for that visit. Healthcare is transitioning into more, quality care. And so, doctors don't have to see as many patients. They just have to do a better job by, keeping people out of the hospital, just minimizing the cost that we spend on patients. And so that was a transition. But at the beginning, I mean, just, I wouldn't be here if Chris Spawn hadn't given me an income guarantee in Alice. And I think that's why you're starting to see that private practice is kind of going away. The corporatization of medicine, and I love working with corporations. I love working with these big companies, but I really wish that we could see more private practices, not kind of dwindling away, because I really think that helps medicine. We really focus on patient care and treating people as people, not as necessarily a number or just cost and things like that. And so at the beginning, one of the biggest challenges was, just how many patients I had to see to be able to, if you will pay the bills, right? Right. And, the most patients that I've seen in a day is over 70 patients, right? And I had to carry two, 3 schedules just so that way I can afford our first. We hired a PA. I think that was our first person that we hired was a PA. But just to be able to hire that PA, I felt like I had to carry several schedules so that way when we brought them in, they had that work already going. And so I could, I would say, okay, well, we have 40 patients on the schedule. Let's divide and conquer. If you have any questions, I'm here for you. Just trying to give them some of the patients that weren't so complex, because I didn't want to burn them out. And so that was one of the biggest challenges, just having to see so many patients just to get where we are.
Yeah. So you mentioned you just shared about there's challenges with balancing patient care, regulatory demands, staffing, billing, and growth. So what business disciplines did you have to learn along the way, and possibly the hard way?
Heidi, it's the billing component of it, because if somebody's not really watching that we're not getting paid for our services, it can really hurt your business. And, I like to think I'm great at math, but finances is something very different. And if it's something that's really a full-time job, and if you're not really taking care of your finances, you can get to the end of the year and IRS says, hey, you profited this much and you owe this many taxes. And it's like, what, where are all those profits at? And so just understanding that business aspect of it and the financial aspect of it, the billing aspect of it is super important. So there was things that we had to learn the hard way as far as making sure we're getting paid for our work.
So you've grown your practice. You now have 3 locations. That means I'm sure not only by expanding your locations, you've also expanded your team size. What systems or processes became critical for maintaining the quality and consistency across the board?
Heidi, that's something that we're working on till this day. I think it's a continuous improvement for something like that. And I like, I've been saying this a lot. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And so we've been fortunate enough to get to where we are with not, I'll now say in the past, and 3 years ago, so to our 7th year roughly, we've been able to get to where we got to without planning so much, without having those specific systems and processes. And so, it really took a mind shift change. What they talk about is your beliefs, right? And so you have to change how you're thinking. and you have to bring your team with you. But you don't want to push too hard because then you're going to burn people out. And just kind of getting into, and I mentioned 3 years ago, that's what happened 3 years ago. I hit that, I'm doing a lot of, I have several different coaches right now. And one of my coaches talks about hitting that pain line, right? And so when you get to that point where you don't really know what to do, you either, self-sabotage is what he talks about. And so maybe you go into, drinking too much, just some kind of substance issues. And so, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs do that. A lot of doctors even do that. And so you either self-sabotage, you stall because you think, hey, if I get smaller, things will get better, or you sell. And that's kind of what happened to me 3 years ago. I almost sold the company because you just kind of get to a point where you have, 50, 60 employees. And right now we have about 70 employees. You get to that point where you think, that you have to do everything, and nobody can do things as good as you can. And so, for me at that point, I had to have a mind shift change, and my mind shift change came with the book that I read. And I'll share the book. It was called the 5 a.m. Club, or it's called the 5 a.m. Club. Great book. Just have to make time for yourself, because it turns out if you want to change things around you, the first thing that happens, you have to change within. And so that's what happened to me. I went out into nature 3 years ago, just thinking that I was just going on a little trip with one of my best friends and my son, or two of my best friends and my son, not realizing how depleted my battery was. And so when I got back, that's when I realized, like, I had that energy, that I charged my battery up, and I was able to say, hey, you know what? This is not going to happen. We can't sell the company, because if we sell the company, our visions were not aligning with the company that wanted to buy us. And so, I became a doctor to help people. And the goal has always been to help as many people as possible. And the way to do that is going to be, I can only see, I told you I saw 70 patients in a day, but that is not something sustainable. So right now I can see, like, 25, 35 patients a day, but now we have, 7, 8 nurse practitioners and PAs. If you multiply, if everybody's seeing, 15 patients a day, then we can take care of even more patients. And so that was always the goal, to take care of as many patients as possible. And so I still didn't realize what was going on, why I was short with people, just I was burnt out. And the way that I realized that was, I went to they called it a physician's financial summit. Something called me to that. I kept seeing it on my Instagram. And so I went to the conference, and I was surrounded by other doctors that had burnt themselves out. And the whole idea with the physician's financial summit, they felt that finances was the main reason for doctors getting burnt out. My father, I really feel, and may he rest in peace, but I really feel the practice of medicine really shortened his life, because he had to work till the end, didn't have that proper retirement, didn't that's what most doctors do. They work until the end, and they don't have that retirement, they don't have that financial acumen. And so I went to that physician's financial summit, met some great people, and they started coaching me about this. And then the next thing that happened was I hired an executive healthcare coach, and that really changed my life, because he helped me, he helped me understand that I am a great leader. And sometimes you kind of self-doubt yourself. And so I think he really, he had just so much confidence in me. And like we spoke a little bit before this interview, he brought into light emotional intelligence, and so it's the EQ, right? And just like, IQ and EQ, IQ is something that you usually can't really get. You can't make that so much better. Maybe you can improve it a little bit, but emotional intelligence, you can improve that significantly. And it's more about a balance. You don't want too much in one area, you don't want too little in another area. You want that fine balance. And at that point, and unfortunately, I feel us doctors, we do have a large ego. And I really let go of my ego 3 years ago. Humility is My coach wrote a book called Humbitious. You want that combination of humble and ambition. And that's really kind of where that mindset shifted. And then ever since then, I've had maybe 2 or 3 more coaches that have really helped me take my life to the next level.
I love the word ambitious. I've never heard of that. So that's the word of the day, maybe the word of the week here. So thank you for sharing that. You know, you've said so much in what you just shared that I want to unpack it a little bit. And one is the emotional intelligence piece. And doctors, I've been speaking with in this segment of our podcast, we talk with different types of leaders and founders and CEOs and things. And right now we're in the medical space. We're talking a lot to a lot of people in the medical space. And you all are highly driven. You have to be. You're high achievers. You have to be. You really got to know your stuff because people's lives are in your hands, right? But you mentioned the ego. And I want a doctor that has an ego, that really believes he's the best, and knows his stuff. But at the same time, like you said, you need to know when to put it aside. Being a doctor and running a business are two different things. And you mentioned this at the beginning. You're not just a doctor. You realize that you're also an entrepreneur, and that and I don't know if they teach you business in medical school. I'm going to venture to say they probably don't. Maybe hopefully they're starting to add that in, because that's a big piece that these doctors coming out of school need to know, especially if they're going to, open their own practice one day. And burnout's a big key piece. And I love that you recognized it and you found support. And I think that's a big thing. High achievers don't always ask for support because they feel like that could be a failure. I shouldn't need to ask for help. I should be able to do this on my own. I've done it this far. And you finding that support, and maybe you didn't actually seek it out, but somebody came to you. I don't know all the specifics, but maybe they felt that they knew that you needed some support there. And by you, I know tomorrow you're leaving. I think it's for 10 days, if I'm correct. You're going on a trip, and you do this on a regular basis now. And that's your way of kind of grounding yourself again and taking care of yourself. You used to, serve 70 patients a day. Now you came down to 25. I would like to know, when was that moment that you realized you needed to make the change? I know you said you were thinking about selling your business, your practice, but when was it that you're like, okay, maybe that's not the decision I have to make? What was that turning point where you decided to keep it? And what were those changes that you made? I know the book was part of that pivotal moment too.
Well, like I mentioned it, and sometimes you have to do less to do more.
Mm.
And for me, I'm so grateful. If you would ask me this 3 years ago, that wouldn't be the case. But we spoke about this earlier. I'm a big believer in the universe and God, and things happen for reasons. I wouldn't be here today if all those things hadn't happened. I wouldn't be here talking with you today. I wouldn't have that mindset that just made me so much stronger. My willpower, I never thought of willpower as a muscle. And so I've been really stretching and making that muscle much harder. Another thing that my first coach mentioned was, stress times rest equals growth. And that equation is something that I live my life on every single day now. And so going on that trip into nature, just really disconnecting, staying in the tent, taking horses to 9,000 feet, just kind of getting back to, just the way that things used to be, and really helped me disconnect and reconnect, if you will. And, I remember telling the person that it was a patient that actually invited me to go on this trip. And so I remember telling him on the way back that I was planning on selling my practice. But then I met with the company again, and our visions just didn't align. And that's when I made the decision. And I'm pretty confident they thought I had lost my mind, maybe because they had seen my financials. And so for me to say, no, we're not going to do it, was certainly, I knew there was going to be a tough road ahead. Fortunately, my wife and I have that strong foundation, that when I told her, hey, I don't think we can do this. I know it's going to be difficult, but if we're going to put in all this effort, we have to do it for ourselves, our family, and our patients. Mm-hmm. And so we made that decision. But in hindsight, like I said, if that doctor hadn't approached me to want to buy the practice, I wouldn't have learned everything that I've learned up until this point. And so it was really when I realized that the visions just didn't align. And we do everything. Our goal is to just do what's best for the patient at all times. I've always mentioned that as long, for me in my career, in my life, as long as I do what's best for my wife, what's best for my patients, and what's best for IRS, then I'm always going to be good, because patients can always they can always call and report us to the board, and really affect the trajectory of our life. And so I take that seriously, and just treat every single patient like they're a human being, and like they're the only person in the world at that moment. And just being able to extend people's lives, is something truly special. And we take that seriously. But when you mix it with the business, it gets a little bit difficult. So what we did was I hired that coach. I was kind of, for about a year, just focused on self-improvement. And then, like I said, when you focus on yourself, everything around you starts to get better. And then before you knew it, my wife, my son, everybody's kind of on that same page. My wife, my son, and myself just ran a half marathon this Saturday. And that was a very special moment, because neither of us were runners before, but it's just really trying to take our lives to the next level, physically, mentally, spiritually. I do tons of meditation when I never even meditated before, meditation, prayer, just different types of meditation. And so just got myself better. And what's happening right now, or this past year, we then hired a coach for the company, because you don't know what you don't know, right? You have to go learn these things. You have to learn new skills. You have to develop skills that you're not as strong at. And that's what it's about building these systems and processes for the longest time. And it still happens at each location. We do things differently. But my goal is to have 20, 40 clinics, right? And so if that's going to be true, we really have to have protocols. We have to have that what the book The E-Myth calls a franchise prototype. And we have to get that franchise prototype. And that's what's happening right now. Is I'm making videos about just exactly what I'm thinking with every single patient, so that way we can really replicate and reproduce the magic that we bring with every single patient every single day. And it doesn't have to be me. We take, so I take care of about 25, 30 patients a day. The practice is taking care of about 150 to 200 patients a day. And so, the future of medicine really lies in nurse practitioners and PAs. There's not enough doctors out there. Doctors are becoming they're specializing so much. And then if they're not specializing what they're doing, they're becoming hospitalists. So that's kind of like a new, there didn't used to be hospitalists 20 years ago. Now, if I have a patient that goes to the hospital, for the most part, I'm not taking care of them in the hospital. That's a hospital group. And so the doctors are either becoming specialists or hospitalists. And then as far as primary care, which I think is really the heart of medicine, that's kind of getting lost because it's very difficult. And so really having to figure out exactly how to make it a successful business model, because unfortunately it is about profits, right? And so the more profit that we can have, the more I can pay our nurse practitioners, other doctors, so that way they feel like it's worth it to do these things. The more we can give back to the community, the more we can give back to our patients. And so it's really about working with insurance companies and just maximizing everything, all the quality bonuses, doing all this extra work, all this extra paperwork that a lot of doctors don't necessarily like to do. And I think that's really what helps us go in the right direction. But at the end of the day, these videos are to help train more nurse practitioners, so that way we can make sure that these communities aren't left without the healthcare that they deserve.
So I'd like to switch gears a little bit, because you mentioned growth and we talked about that. And I want to learn more about who you serve. For those who are listening, especially if they're in your area, we want to make sure that they know you're there. You're in a competitive space. And you said the goal is to keep your patients out of the hospitals. That's what the goal is. So how are you standing out amongst the other competitors in your space, or like, quote unquote, standing out from the crowd? What are you doing as far as being visible and making sure that the people who you can serve are seeing you and knowing about you and know that they can come, be a patient of yours? What's working for you? Maybe marketing wise, visibility, and maybe on the flip side, Dr. Carlos, what have you tried that maybe hasn't worked for you?
Right. So just super, like I mentioned, super passionate about the underserved, and unfortunately, the underserved and the most vulnerable, tend to be at the spectrums of ages. Not, I would say the most vulnerable, because I think there's a really good amount of pediatricians. I think children get great health care. Now, our passion is, our older kids, people that are 65 and older. So we really focus on. I personally, our clinics see 18 and older patients, but me personally, I'm focused on 65 and older. Our oldest patient's 100, and so these are the patients that are the most vulnerable, and they can be the most critical. And so I really feel what stands out for us is, we're just so good at taking care of the most critical patients, and not just kind of maintaining them and at critical. It's about taking that critical patient and giving them a new breath of life, and taking them from, a patient comes to mind, an 87-year-old female that I saw 7 years ago, who I thought things weren't looking good. That prognosis wasn't very good at that time. She had, heart failure, fluid in the lungs, kidneys are failing. But we get them in with the help of their family member. And so from kind of borderline going to the next life to giving them, she's 94 now. She's still walking. Her kidneys and heart are still, they're still not 100%. But if you talk to her compared to 7 years ago, she's just doing so much better. And so that's what we're really good at, taking care of just the most critical patients and giving them more life. And
Yeah.
as far as, it is a competitive market, Heidi, but it doesn't have to be, because there's so many patients out there. And so I like to think that we work well with the insurance companies to bring the best care to the patients. What I always talk about is maximizing all the resources. Patients are going to get better at home. So whether we're using nurses to go visit them at home, doing physical therapy at home, getting their blood at home. Now, now you can get x-rays and everything at home. And so, I really think home care is the future of medicine as well. And so we're really good at keeping people healthy, taking people that are very critical and bringing them to not so critical, and keeping them out of the hospital, because that's, at the end of the day, that really is the goal.
Yeah. A question for you when it comes to your marketing, because I know you had mentioned to me, like, oh, yeah, like you're just thinking about, like, you're on this podcast. This is a way of being visible. And you had shared that, you thought about wanting to be on a podcast or trying to dip your toe in that water. And then, we connected with you. What made you want to start branching out into this space with guesting on podcasts? And two, what are some other things? I know you mentioned you have a digital marketing team. So what are they doing to help you get out there more too?
I was honestly skeptical, but like I mentioned before, I want to take care of as many patients as possible. And so what we started doing was making videos, because it turns out, I can take care of, maybe one person at a time, maybe two or three people at a time, which isn't very common. We're mainly taking care of one. It's a one-on-one deal. When you make a video, I mean, you can reach thousands of people at one time. And so, sometimes people don't even realize that certain illnesses, or like diabetes, people think that it's not reversible. And so bringing out videos that talk about that it is reversible, and this is what you need to do to get that taken care of, can really help to heal people without, them having to go to a doctor, without them having to go see us. And it used to be like, you don't want you don't want to kind of give away your secrets, but now, no, I want to share it with the world, because the more you give back, the more you receive. And I'm a big believer in that. And so that was kind of part of it. And I want to get better as a speaker. And the only way to get better is to do these things. And so, I'd been kind of telling myself, I'd love to do a podcast, and I was kind of putting that out into the universe. And I get an email from you, and I looked at it a little bit, and I said, oh, this is a great opportunity, just to get our voice out there, just so people can know who, maybe they'll never get to see me, but they'll be able to see part of the team, and they can go back and reference some of these videos or these podcasts, just to kind of see the kind of people that we are, and the kind of family, environment that we're building here.
Yeah, I love it. So what's next for you? I know that you Dr. Carlos, I know you mentioned that you want to have a lot more, you want to open up a lot more practices so that, or clinics so that you can support more people. But what else? Like what's over the next, if we could bring you back in 12 months from now, like what's next? What does success look like for you?
For me, it's about systems, right? Producing these systems so that way we can do the same thing every single time. The patients get something consistent. Making these training videos to teach exactly what's going on, how we make people feel like they're the only person in the universe, how we make them feel like family, how we make them feel comfortable so that way they can open up and just really tell us everything that's wrong with them. You got to build that rapport with them. And so making these training videos to make it more systematic, how do we check in a patient at the front desk? The same way every single time. How do we check out a patient at the front desk? How does the MA bring back a patient? How do we take the plan of the doctor or the nurse practitioner PA and execute that plan? Being super consistent. Whenever a problem arises, how do we address that problem? One of the things that we're trying to create here is just a different culture, a culture of when a patient has a problem, you need to see that as an opportunity to make a difference in that patient's lives, because percent of our patients are going to be healed just by coming to see us. And it doesn't always mean that the doctor or the nurse practitioner or the PA will heal them. It could be somebody in the front desk or one of the MAs or one of the nurses that really went that extra mile to make the patient feel very important, that really makes that difference in that visit. And so healing is a team sport with us.
If you could go back to your younger self, Dr. Carlos, and give your younger self one piece of advice about starting and scaling a healthcare business, what would that advice be?
Like I mentioned earlier, right? You got to plan. You have to know where you're going. I have a message I'm going to send to our staff before I leave. Goals are like that GPS, the address that you got to put in the GPS. And if you don't have any goals, then you're not going to know which direction to go. If you want to go to Houston, but you put San Antonio in the GPS, then you're not going to get to Houston. And so just something so basic as goals and just relating it to GPS. And I think everybody can relate to that. I don't know anybody that drives anywhere anymore without putting it in their maps.
Um, Even if I've been there 7 times, I'm still mapping it out to find the best, quickest route, right?
Right. And you want to know how quick, how long is it going to take? And so I think it's the same thing. And it's really being more, I used to always think that I was so much better spontaneous. And I'm really good at that. But if you plan it and you're still spontaneous, it's even more magical. And so that I would have just paid more attention to detail at the beginning. And we never realized that we would grow to 3 clinics serving 200 patients a day. We take care of about 3,000 Medicare lives, and our goals many more than that. And so it's very cool how when you get to a certain bar, you're always going to set that bar a little bit higher, and then a little bit higher and a little bit higher. And so that's kind of where we're at right now, is working to build those systems and processes so that way everybody's doing the same thing at every single location. As that happens, and it's not always going to be perfect, but as that happening, then we feel more comfortable scaling, because we can anticipate what's going to happen when we go to this market or go to this market. We can anticipate the cash flow, things that I'm not very good at, but you hire people that are better than you at that. And you have to understand it a little bit, but I'm just super passionate about patient care. And I'm just grateful for the whole team for allowing me to continue with what I'm passionate about.
Yeah, you got to let that ego go, right? Like you do focus on what your zone of genius is, what you're really good at, and bring in the people that are really good at the other stuff. You'll be more efficient, less stressed, no burnout, and creating a really successful business in the meantime, and serving more patients across the board. And helping them live longer and healthier and more fulfilled, better lives. And I love that you said, less is more. Sometimes we got to take a step back in order to move forward. And you did that when you were going through the burnout. So thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for sharing your journey today. You've shared a lot of gold nuggets. There's so many that I can't even drop them all right now, but I know that our listeners had a lot of takeaways. So I really appreciate your time. Can you share with us, Dr. Carlos, how people can connect with you, reach out to you, learn more about you in your facilities, your clinics?
Yeah, our clinic is the Elizondo Medical Group, and you can Google that online, and you can go to our website, elizondomedicalgroup.com. Right now, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. I have a personal page with my name, and then I have our business pages. And so I'm in the process of really focusing on that, because I understand that that's the future as well, and just being more involved. I would consider that was my weakness. And so now you see I'm posting once a week to my personal pages now. We bring out content to our business page, Elizondo Medical Group, very frequently. I just actually did some videos this morning, and what you'll start to see is more videos about how we take care of patients, how we take care of somebody with diabetes, how we take care of somebody with high blood pressure. And so you can find us online, like I said, on the Elizondo Medical Group .com, and just you can Google us, and you can just Google my name, Carlos Elizondo.
Perfect. And we're going to have all of Dr. Carlos's information in the show notes. So don't worry if you're driving, we got you. Just go to the show notes and we'll be able to hook you up with him there, as well as his bio and some more information about him. So please go check it out there. If you're watching us on YouTube, thank you. We both appreciate you spending time with us. Please share this episode with anyone that you know that could benefit from hearing Dr. Carlos here today. Share him all the messages he shared, all the gold that he dropped, whether it's they're building a business or there's someone that could use some support from what he's sharing as far as health and wellness go with his practice. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, thank you. We would love a review, 5 stars preferably. And because that helps the platforms share Dr. Carlos here and this interview with more people. And he shared a lot, whether it's them wanting to heal and get healthier or they're growing a business. He shared what he's gone through in building his 3 practices and all the other ones that he's going to be creating in the future. Dr. Carlos shared what's been working for him and not working for him as far as visibility, the things that he's stepping out of his comfort zone and doing, getting more active on social media, starting to do guesting on podcasts. So thank you, Dr. Carlos, for being here. Before I let you go, is there anything that last words that you want to share or say that I didn't get to ask you or we didn't touch on today?
Heidi, I just want to say thank you so much for having me today. And one thing I've been sharing with people is the most important people in everybody's life is going to be themselves, right? And so you really have to focus on yourself so that way you can serve the world. And so I think that's super important. That's something that a lot of entrepreneurs don't do, a lot of doctors don't do, a lot of people don't do. And so I think it's very important to really, really take care of yourself. And then secondly, it's going to be your family. Take care of your family. If you take care of yourself and your family, then everything else falls into place.
Yeah, I love that. And it's true. We kind of put everybody else first. Men and women both do it. And it's not selfish to put yourself first, because if your cup isn't full and running over, then you can't serve your patients, you can't serve your family, you can't serve the people that you want to be here to support. And we're all here to make a difference in the world for someone. And I also love that you talked about the GPS and the goals. And you need to have a vision, you need to have a direction, you need to have a plan. And that's really important. And also that, when you declare something, when you put it out there, whether it's in your mind or verbally, the universe, as long as you have that faith and trust behind you, because if you think it, you can achieve it, right, Dr. Carlos? If you think it, you can achieve it. And by putting it out there, the universe will conspire to bring it to you, or bring those people to you that can support you in creating your vision. I know Dr. and Carlos and I talked about it before we hit record, that this was a challenge for both of us. And I tested it. And when it actually happened and things showed up I never thought could happen for me in my life, I was blown away. And this is what he moved through too, when moving through burnout. So we invite you to do that as well. I think that's a big, big piece. Yeah. So I don't want to take up more of your time because I know we're running low and I want to be respectful. So thank you, Dr. Carlos, for being here today. Thank you all for listening and being here with us. And I look forward to seeing you all on the next episode of the Business Growth Spotlight.